Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spinner Rack. I'm here with my boys, PD and Cal. Say what's up, gents.
What's going on?
Hey, we're ready to rock.
Hey, there's a controversy going on right now about who is really the creator of Wolverine. I mean, this is relevant now because Marvel has basically told the wife of Len Wein, one of the creators of Wolverine, that hey, Roy Thomas will now officially be listed as a co-creator of Wolverine. So of course, I brought my brain trust right here to discuss this whole issue. What do they think about it? And is this a controversy or is it not? Is it a lot of nothing? Is it a lot of something? I'm gonna pass it on to Cal since you have a little background on this. Hit us with your best shot.
All right, so let's see. At the time, Roy Thomas is publisher, no, not publisher, but editor-in-chief Marvel Comics, and he noted that Marvel Comics had a large, a sizable contingent of Canadian readers. And because of that readership, he commissioned that a Canadian superhero be created. So he basically did come up with the framework for what would become Wolverine. He didn't do the costume design, that type of stuff, but I believe the name of the character and the actual idea and the commissioning of it, that comes from Roy Thomas. Now, I think traditionally, editors don't get those type of co-credits, because if that's the case, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that someone like Mort Wessinger would have been a co-creator on at the end of the day. But then a lot of the other guys wouldn't have gotten that creator credit either, because they were either work for hire and everything was going to be owned by the entity. It's different over at Marvel, and well, it's just different altogether now. But it's not something that should come out of anyone who knows comic history. This should not be coming out of left field for anyone, and it shouldn't really create a large argument. The reason for Wolverine's creation is at the direction of Roy Thomas as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at that time.
Well, I think that is also the crux of what the issue is with, I think, Bobby Chase and maybe Mark Waid, that as editorial, and you say go off and do something, you, as history goes, whether it be, as you said, Mort Wessinger or any like Roy Thomas, that you don't get a creator sort of credit, but that at the same time needs to be in question, because it seems like, as you were saying, Cal, and as Roy Thomas has said, he gave some key pieces to Wolverine. He gave the idea of, as you said, the three things you said, and he also said he should be kind of feisty and short, right? So that's not a full character, right? So it can be looked at that, but we're constantly trying to take away credit from people that are least involved, not say monetarily, but say, you know what, the Fantastic Four, we wouldn't have a Fantastic Four without Martin Goodman, right? Because that's at the same time we have someone like Steve Ditko saying most of the Marvel titles we wouldn't have if Martin didn't ask for, hey, give us another superhero. Like, hey,
I don't know about that one. I thought that.
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you. Go ahead, keep rolling.
But in saying that, not saying giving them full credit, but just saying the person who said this, and at the same time, someone like Sergeant Rock, someone coming in and saying, hey, you came up with this thing, but they're saying those guys should get no credit, nothing at all, and moving on to it. Bobby Chase goes on for a decent while, but it's at the same time, it's like just giving someone a nod, some sort of respect. Should you not give the person, the editor-in-chief at the time, something? Why are they? It seems like she's very hard-edged to say nothing when Wolverine, they're not even giving credit to Dave Cockrum for the face of Wolverine, not giving listening Byrne and Claremont, they can't even figure out who gave him the name Logan. Both of them tossed it back to each other. And he said, well, I think Byrne said that it was the biggest mountain, and Byrne is like, I think that came before me. So it's like the Marvel's serendipity is the important part to Wolverine. And I understand too, Len Wein's his widow, that he has a big part of Wolverine, the feistiness, all that stuff. But Wolverine, the success of Wolverine has so many people being involved in it it's just like one of the craziest things to be like, we're going to fight to say we just want to keep it three people. You know,
Mm.
Lane,
Let's-
Trimpe, and John Romita.
So here, let me here's probably read off a couple of things from what some people have said. Basically, just some spot things, right? So Christine Balada, she reached out to Len Wein's wife, and he says she's basically saying that this is not exactly what the history of what people talk about. Basically, like for example, the Canadian accent. Len Wein brought that about. He claimed because he'd done the Brother Voodoo, the Haitian magician's accent, which actually was a Jamaican accent, but he used that and turned it into a Canadian accent. And the name they're saying could have been from a fan subscription. Another person is like, I mean, Roy was the editor in chief at the time, and it's not really in the realm of traditional creator getting credit for those particular jobs. You know, you give what do you say, suggestions or direction to Jason Weaver. Mark Wade says basically, yeah, Roy gets some minor bragging rights, and that's it. Full stop. No argument. He deserves zero financial equity, zero because he was paid. He was a paid staffer at the time, and brainstorming and guidance like this is an editor's. I'm going to say clean language
Yeah,
job.
I disagree with that. It's
Okay. So I mean, and
see,
then of course Rob Liefeld is going to come up with something a little later. So
well, that's really tricky because it's a lot of nobody got credit up until a
Yes.
certain point.
Yes.
No one got credit. So the idea that Roy Thomas shouldn't get credit because of this, and he should, well, no, the editor didn't get credit, the assistant editor didn't get credit, the guys who worked on the book didn't get credit because it was owned by the parent company. It was all done, and this was done for obvious reasons because if everybody got credit, everybody got money, it would not be profitable. So you will work for hire. The idea of getting credit was something that was done retroactively once you got after that whole thing went down with Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. That's when people started retroactively getting credit for some of these character creations, unless you were somebody like Joe Simon and you owned your stuff outright. You did the legal stuff at the end of the day. But most of these guys came in, and they were work for hire. If not, Carmen Infantino could sue, be like, hey, all those Silver Age looks, that's all me.
all right, so here,
I want my money.
so here's the thing. And I think one school of thought is like look at Stan Lee. Stan Lee gets credited as a creator of a lot of different characters, right? And he
Yeah.
was editor in chief, right? So if
And
you read,
writer, but he was a writer though.
so he
Yeah,
was
he was
writing
also
it,
writing.
but he was not only that. I'm just saying, the editor in chief, and he was making suggestions from names, how it was, and he was writing. So
Stan is a totally,
Yeah.
and this is where anytime PD and I discuss this, Stan is not your average editor writer because at the time, at one point, almost the entire staff is gone, and Stan Lee's the only person there. He's writing all the books, he's doing all the editing. Okay, he was there because I think after Kirby left and it was Atlas Comics. Between Atlas and it becoming Marvel, Stan was doing a lot. I mean, of this stuff on his own, and most people are thinking just about the superhero stuff. Stan Lee was writing the superhero stuff. He was writing the romance comic. He was writing the westerns. He was all over the place in terms of the writer credit. So that's one. And then two, he wasn't getting credit for that stuff. He didn't get credit for it initially. Again, even with him, it's retroactive. And a lot of this stuff is retroactive because when the company got sold, they wanted to keep Stan on. Okay, and that became where we got the whole Stan Lee Presents thing. So Stan is that's like a once in a lifetime thing. They're never going to let that type of thing happen. If you want to credit, we'll say, okay, we want to credit Martin Goodwin because he looks and says, hey, Justice League is selling pretty well. Why don't we come up with our own version of this? But what Stan and Jack came up with was definitely not the Justice League. And then if I follow that, I should go back and say, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to credit DC Comics for the Fantastic Four because they created the Justice League.
You're going. It's not that. It's just getting the discussion to say, look at what's going on here. It's like this is a collaborative process, and at the same time, most of the time when it came to Marvel, you have this serendipity in the fact that we have him wanting. They're saying possibly just bringing back whatever heroes they had and put them in a group like Captain America, Human Torch, and and the Submariner, and then we get the Fantastic Four. And the same time, like the thing is just pointing out, like this is a party, a person that's just forgotten. Like Mort Wessinger is remembered. Like the fact that Martin Goodman is just kind of a footnote in the success. And at the same time, the Kirby people are like, Martin Goodman didn't even tell them to do a war comic or or a superhero group. He was like, Kirby came to them. They were on their heels, and he came with all these products from home because that gives him creator credit from home. But ultimately, I think what is it? I think the W was it. I think Roy Thomas was saying that. I guess it would almost factor in. He's like saying, because he said Stan was talking about, hey, if you come to someone and say, I want to do the A team, and say I want to be 4 action-packed guys, like the WGA would say, the writer kind of put that thing together. Now, the Wolverine process is a little more than that because he gave him a little more direction than just saying, here's a name, give me a story type of deal with an accent. But he gave some. He was saying he gave some more. I think it's tough because at the same time there's just so many people involved, and there's so many times where you didn't have a situation like City on the Edge of Forever on Star Trek, where you have Gene Roddenberry and Harlan kind of going back and forth. Like Leonard Nimoy says, success has many fathers, and failure is on its own. Now Wolverine, when he was a nobody, Endor, when Claremont was like, I really wish they hadn't killed Thunderbird because he had a cool costume and didn't like Wolverine. You didn't know that, when Byrne came on there, was kind of like saying that this is the guy. And then after Byrne is gone, they pushed it even further to the hilt. And what Byrne mainly gave to him was like playing up the boy, the bad boy angle and the adamantium skeleton. But Chris Claremont gave him said the claws were real before that. So many pieces to this puzzle, and you can't credit everybody. But can you, the person who said it, I don't know. Roy feels like he's a part of it, and as far as how it works. So I'm not really against it, but I always look at it as like Wolverine. You don't give any credit to Cockrum for the face. You don't get the name, and that's the thing where we have creators. It's not Wolverine is not created in one day. He's created after a time. The same you could say about Venom when Todd McFarlane was taking credit for Venom. Like he basically the costume was already designed. He didn't have the teeth in there. He just had a bulkier Spider-Man. And Eddie Brock is the personality. But I think a lot of times people forget, even when they talk about people like Iron Man, Thor, some of the basic stuff, like the names of Don Blake, the characterization of these characters. You had Stan's brother writing scripts for it. So it's just kind of, I get it, but they're trying to sue and they're trying to, turn, I guess, Len Wein's his widow to a victim here in the struggle for creators' rights. But I think. Hmm?
Well, I understand that where the history for me comes in is that this shouldn't be about somebody being a victim. If he's, as long as Len Wein is credited, that should be enough. There shouldn't be any issue with it at that point. If they decide, okay, we're going to credit Roy Thomas, and historically that's accurate, which it is, I don't see what the argument is. I don't see what the argument is about, or how it takes away from anything. This is what happened. Unless there's some stuff that, I'm not hearing about it. If he, historical, yes. Roy Thomas, Wolverine is created at the direction of Roy Thomas, and Roy Thomas doesn't just go out and say, "Hey, make me a Canadian superhero." He has certain elements that are that are still crucial to what we know about Wolverine. So that is there, but you also have the situation that a lot of people don't seem to want to address. That at that time, nobody got credit for creating these characters. Okay, that was your job. That's like that's like me. It's like you're a teacher and your student goes on to become like very successful. Well, I don't get 10% of their proceeds. I don't get it. That's not how it works. And that's not how it worked back then. So no one was going to get credit. So the idea of, well, he was doing this and it was at direction and that's what editors did. Yes. And writers and artists didn't get credit either. So you have to take that into account.
I mean, I get what you're saying here, but and it makes a lot of points. I think time is an issue but the timeline that PD is showing right here, where Len Wein died 2017, Herb 2015, Stan 2018, no one, John Romita 23. No, well, I guess he did do the article before John Romita Sr. died, but the point of the matter is that, you know, that he's claiming that he had influence in there, and I think probably it's the role of what we see as the editor, because Stan Lee, yeah, you said he did a lot of writing, he did, but so did Roy Thomas, even in his role uh, um, as a editor. Wasn't he? I think he was working on Fantastic Four, according to one of the articles I read. You know, and so amongst others. So I can't imagine that he wasn't writing. I think the problem is that, you know, like you said, no one was claiming these type of you know, that I was the sole owner, or I'm the sole creator of it. But now people look back and say, well, hey, um, Stan Lee was the editor in chief. He was deeply involved in these comics, and Roy Thomas learned from that mode, right? So probably he did the same thing too, you know. And he's claiming he gave the name and all this other stuff, but other people like are saying, well, no, we heard a whole different story from Len Wein. We heard a whole different story here and there. So what
Yeah,
do
they
you
can
mean
say
by that?
no. They see that whole hearsay of we heard this that no, that's not gonna that's just not gonna fly. So and it's unfortunate when people do that too, because all you're doing now is you're stirring the pot, and you're stirring the pot with nothing to be done for it at the end of the day. If, you know, we heard this, we heard that. No, you have you actually have the history, documented history of what happened in terms of this character's creation. So the other stuff about, well, I heard this and I heard that, that's sort of like, well, who created the name Logan? And both guys are saying this guy created it. We don't know. Or you give them both equal, or you're going to give them both equal credit as to the whole thing. But to be honest, like what Petey was saying earlier, Wolverine was a character that took 10 years to catch fire. 10 years that this guy was around and he was there, and he was not this great giant fan favorite character until he caught fire with the Wolverine limited series. So it's unfortunate, but you know, this at the end of the day, this is about money, and so less so than credit. I do the timing of Roy Thomas. I don't know about that. You know, I don't know why he decided to come out at the time that he did. I don't know if he's spoken to that, but
Movie, the
you know,
Deadpool
I'm
Wolverine
still
movie.
trying to understand. Huh?
The Deadpool Wolverine movie's coming out. So I mean, having him listed as a co-creator while he's not getting money out,
Mhm.
he goes, I guess,
Aha.
cons and other things. To quote, that's something that he's one of the last surviving co-creators.
Okay, I gotta cut
I
in.
still don't get it. I still don't get it because let me
Peter,
say
can you
this,
explain it?
and I'll let you cut in. No, hold on. I still don't understand because this isn't the first movie Wolverine's appeared in. So I don't understand why, and I don't understand why these guys would have to die, okay, in order for him to come in and say, "Oh yeah, I'm a co-creator too," because you're still going to base it on the same information. It's not going to change.
Okay, that is the point. That is the big point. I'm gonna go to, if you look at what I have here, this is from the movie Logan from
This is
2017.
IMBD.
Huh?
This is IMBD.
Yes, IMDb. And this has the thank yous that they gave, because they don't give you creator credit when they talk about it. They give you thank you to these people for what they contributed to the character, right? So Len Wein, I'm just going to try to find out when he passed in 2017, right? So at this time when he passed, we have Roy Thomas acknowledged here in that point, because I knew Roy Thomas said that someone decided that I was a co-creator again, and that's how he first got credit. So in 2017, when the Logan movie came out, he got credit, and for somehow, I'm sorry to say, the Johnny Come Latelys came out and decided that with John Romita Sr. gone and Len gone and Herb Trimpe gone, that like now we're gonna say that this came out of nowhere. It was already established with Logan. So
When did
it's
Logan come out, Peter? Can you at least
2017. I said it again. I said Logan in 2017. So it was already established. He had said this in interviews. Roy Thomas had said this in interviews. And
Well, there you
now,
go.
7 years later, people are going around saying that. Now, if you had that issue and it was coming up there, I'm saying all we do as comic people look at these end things. He said it in there, and someone wake up, wait a second, we got an issue now. And now they're gone. So you can have the issue of it, right? Because you came too late. But you can't say it was put in late so no one else could say something. It was around the time when he passed, It would have been if it was a bigger issue, but they know that after the initial payouts that Disney gave, they're not sending a ton of money to people. We heard that from Jim Starlin. So it's really getting the nod saying that, and a couple of cents depending on what you get from the character. They could be a lot, could be less. But at the same time, it wasn't snuck in now in 2014. It was already established. I just want to get that out there because
But
I
see,
knew
well,
it was earlier.
no, that's good information to have too, because this isn't something that I was abreast of. I'm not, aware of any of this until we're doing the show, but I know the history behind it. But I didn't know that he had received credit for it in 2017. So then it should just be like, wait a second, you guys are real late to the party, almost 10 years late to the party
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Where no, this was already established here. And then they really want to make this thing, oh, you're spitting on Len, you're taking money out of his widow's mouth. And like, yeah, he's been doing it since 2017, according to you people. You're just getting it now. But, so this happened here. You guys are late. Back up, back off, go home, and create your own character, and create your own characters.
All right, Martin, you have something to say. What is your overall opinion?
Who, me?
Yes, you. You got the floor. You ask me, you ask Cal. What is your opinion?
The problem is that I'm still trying to get an understanding of what the industry is there. I think that, someone made a very good point where they're saying that, the editors are in this, at least back then, were really involved in how these comics were set up and done.
Yeah, I mean, they still are. A lot
Okay.
of, at least with Marvel, a lot of the stuff is editor driven. Of today, a lot of the stuff is editor driven. It's, whereas, I mean, again, anytime people are thinking of Marvel Comics, they're thinking of that early period, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Larry Lieber, Steve Ditko. They're thinking that real early period where there's a lot of collaboration with the Marvel bullpen. But again, nobody was going to be very protective about this stuff because they knew they didn't own it. They knew they didn't own it. And the job was, hey, I'm only going to get pages and I'm only going to get work depending on how well I'm able to produce and make these particular creations. That's what you were paid to do. You didn't own it. And then this is something that comes into play retroactively. And in coming into it retroactively, everybody's got an opinion of them. Like, you've got to know the history before you can start picking a side.
I mean, and I agree. It's tough, when people are saying this. It's just, I guess people are just used to, hearing it a particular way. I mean, we all know Roy Thomas was definitely involved in Conan, right? Along with many other things too. But people feel that Len Wein, who's one of the giants of the industry, but is not as well known probably outside of it, has slowly, some of his creations are being taken up by someone else, and they're afraid. Like now, if you start, it's like basically having management, coming in and saying, "Hey, we also have a piece of the action here." But like you were saying, what more Weisgerber, I think it was
Weisinger.
Weisinger, when he was involved in the Batman, right? How involved was he? Was he the one who helped come up with the name? Was he the one who helped come up with the structure? Was he the one who came up,
No, Mort Weisinger?
You talking about Len Wein? Or more? You're talking about Superman?
Batman.
No, Mort Weisinger didn't have much to do with Batman.
Right, he didn't. But did he have much to do with any characters? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes, he did. Mort Weisinger brought Superman into line. When he came in, he was like, okay, Superman, this is the big character for us, and he's all over the place. So he's like, no, I want his history to be streamlined. He gets here from Krypton. Where does he, he lives. He's Superboy. So he helped to streamline all of that. And a lot of the Silver Age elements, which would be the Kryptonian elements like Kandor, Supergirl, Krypton, all that stuff happened under Mort Weisinger's watch. It's like he had, his edict was that every 6 months he wanted like something new out of Krypton because he felt that was very fertile ground where they could just keep mining it and they could keep getting story ideas. And the kids liked it too. All those different types of kryptonite, all of that's under him, all of it.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the question is, should he be considered also a co-creator? He is management though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, see, the idea of considering him a co-creator would be false because he is a co-creator. Because the way that Mort Weisinger was running the show, he had these edicts, and these guys were pretty much going out and executing it. So a lot of the ideas came from him on top. However, if you would have gone to Mort Weisinger at that time and say, "Well, you're a co-creator," he'd be like, "No, I don't own any of this. DC National periodicals, they own it." Now, if Mort Weisinger is alive today, and he's like, "What do you mean I can retroactively have credit?" Mort Weisinger would be like a co-creator on like 60% of the Silver Age stuff that was created for Superman.
What's your take on
But
that, Pete?
Now, the thing of it is, as the editor, like the thing of it is, most of the time, I don't know that he would, possibly, and I think that, Cal is, probably 100% correct, but most of the time we had people like Stan Lee, who basically, if Mort Weisman was still around, he'd probably be an exec producer, treated like a king. He'd be the same way Stan was. So at the same time, he probably get so much money from them, he would be there. But at the same time, if he was more like the creators, he would probably done the same thing. So it's tough because it felt like, and I'm not going to Mort Weisinger because I mean, I just wanted to add in that bit. It's not even to disagree with Cal. I was just kind of saying I could see if he was here around here. The same like I think was it Whitney Ellsworth, where he went off to TV and Glorious left comic books and saying, "I'm leaving. Here you go, Mort." It's like, I'm gonna stay with the Squinty and move the rest of my life in television, that sort of thing, and move on and not sit around here. Whereas I think with all the success of Marvel, like Martin in the '90s from the comic books alone, like I don't think Martin Goodman could even get interview from anybody where he's an important part of a lot of stuff, and not to say not in creation, but the fact that when Marvel had no legs, they were struggling before in the 50s. He only had Stan, but he was still like looking at the covers and deciding, I like this, I don't like that, I don't like that, change that, don't have rats in the comic books, that sort of thing, and struggling with Stan writing all this dialogue. What the hell? What is all this dialogue? Okay, it's a success. Just do whatever you want in the books. It's like, hey, that cover Neil Adams did, the characters are covering the logo. You got to get rid of that sort of thing. So I'm looking at, because she connected, but going back to Bobby Chase, and this is obviously she's a long-standing editor at so she obviously definitely knows her business. She connected Howard Mackey, who's a writer of which you did the reference for Ghost Rider. Chris Claremont has been connected to this. Who else is on here? Peter Sanderson, who's also a historian, he's linked on this, and a couple other people I don't know. Obviously, we already talked about that. And it's not to just sit around here and contradict people that are already in the business, because I don't think that's the case. It's just that ultimately it was kind of whoever in the movie people decided Roy should get, and I don't think he knew that it was going to happen. He mentioned it as an afterthought that, hey, someone decided that I was part of Wolverine's creation again. So that's how he got the nod in there. And I thought it might have been in the X-Men, but it was in Logan. So we just kind of get into this thing where, it gets kind of crazy. And I know they're not, and Disney is not, after the initial payouts, and I thought Len was in the movie. Like him and Claremont was in the movie, in one of the X-Men movies. So I'm pretty sure they got possibly their bigger paydays from showing up on set.
Weren't they in Logan?
I'm not sure. It could be. They could be in. No, actually, it had to be the X-Men because I think Len passed the same year, so it could be in. It could be in there because I know they were in like the Senate hearing. So I think it might be Days of the Future Past, but I could be wrong. You could be right with that. I'm not sure, but his passing was the same year as Wolverine. But kind of adding in that John Romita Sr. like someone was waiting for John Romita Sr. to pass, and all right, he passed. Now give Roy the credit. Like we've been waiting to bring him in there, and it's like I don't think there's a lot of money in on the DC side. That's the thing. If the DC side was there, like going back to like, I don't think Mort Weisinger would have had to ask for anything. They would have probably showered him with money. Whether you can say behind the scenes the stories came to him and he said, "I like this one, I like that one. Let's do this one," that sort of thing. Or he had, as he said, he came up with it and said, "Do a Supergirl, do a Legion or something like that." So I think they would have just been like, "Yes." Look at all this great thing. Hollywood have been like, this guy, he gave us our what's the name? He no, it was part of the expansion team on it, so we're making all those titles. So it's I just wanted to say, it's kind of late to do this, and I don't want to put in any kind of crazy
Well,
conspiracy into it. I could
yeah,
go in with other stuff, not on this.
and you got to be careful of these fans too, because these guys get whipped up thinking that somehow, they're championing some sort of cause, and they'll just end up making a mess. They're literally just making a mess because they don't know the history, and they're just looking. Really, they're just looking for who's the little guy, who's the big guy, and that's it. They're not very nuanced about this whole thing. They don't. You just can't do it. I mean, I've done my own stuff when I have people. I mean, I've created my own characters where literally everything about that character is my creation, even down to the design. The only thing that I couldn't do is draw it because I don't draw. That's it. And if somebody were then to come and say, well, I came in and I created the character because I drew it, which means that would just pretty much mean that I could never get this character up off the ground unless, well, I guess I could do it now with AI. But I would never be able to get the character up off the ground because as long as you can draw and I can't, then you've got it over on me. That would be, that's where you would get into that sort of thing at the end of the day. If it follows that, that progress, that if it ends at its logical end, that's where it would be. So for a lot of this stuff, again, you have to know the history, you have to know the time period, and you have to understand what the parameters were in terms of what it meant to create a character, and even retroactively, what it means to have that type of credit at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, thank you very much, guys. I mean, I don't know where else we can go with that. It seems that we all agree that Len Wein should get some. Another one that Roy Thomas should get some type of creator credits on this whole Wolverine thing. Um, we think that there's been some precedent that's been set in the past already that people have seen. I mean, he is like on the X and X2. I believe he's already been uncredited for the Logan character from that far back. I don't know when that happened, but
Well,
um,
you have to ask the question: if Roy Thomas doesn't, if Roy Thomas doesn't commission this character to be created, do we ever have Wolverine? I think the answer is no.
interesting. What's your thought, PD?
Yeah, there's definitely no Wolverine without Roy. There's no new. I mean, the thing of it is he has less creation part in the new X-Men, but he's the one who said, "Len, get on the new X-Men," and that's a kind of a collab between Len and what's the name. But that whole first domino is important to the whole thing. But at the same time, the what used to be known, I mean, these guys should know it more than I do. Marvel serendipity is having Roy say, I want the X-Men come back, and I want them to be mutant Blackhawks. I want them to be all different nationalities from different areas, an international team. And that's not characterization, but it's an important piece that needs to be a part of history, the same like the Wolverine part. So I don't know how much money you get for adding that in there, but I think keeping all of the pieces in there and keeping the part that you had such an exciting title, you had a great character because I mean, as a kid, seeing Wolverine when I first saw him, I thought he was cool, but at the same time, the X-Men wasn't selling. And if I would have saw the first issue where he fought the Hulk, I would have thought it was cool too. I mean, most of the Hulk characters that he was fighting, I thought were cool. That Herb Trimpe was coming up with. Who knew that was going to be the one that was? When you're an X-Men fan, of course, at that point you're like, oh yeah, this is it, he's it. But I think Rob Liefeld acts like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But at the same time, as you go along, you find that the X-Men almost was canceled. You have
Is that
Archie.
is life
Hmm?
is Liefeld making another one of his observations when he's saying that?
Well, with him, I think he was saying, oh, because the original X-Men are temple touchers and such. He was trying to. Well, Wolverine had these claws. It's like, well, you had people don't want to believe us. You have Tom Brevoort who was saying, here, look at the X-Men numbers. We've done a thing where we looked at the X-Men numbers to point out that the sales weren't there until like 1980. So we've done that before Brevoort did it. But if you want to go to him, he points out that the sales don't pick up until the print run was very low. It's like well under the originals. They dipped to like I think under 250,000, and the new X-Men was at like 100, and that's because it was 6 times a year, 100,000. But at at the same time, you have Archie Goodwin who says, "Hey, if this thing goes monthly, I think he's going to catch." And he talked to people, the higher ups who had already bought Marvel, say, "Don't cancel it yet. But we'll switch artists, we'll get it monthly, and then maybe it'll catch." And that's basically what happened. Because the energy, Byrne always talks about the energy was already in the book. Like Cockrum and Claremont were doing a very energetic book. It was an exciting book, great art and whatnot. And just the numbers weren't there. It just needed to go monthly, and Cockrum couldn't really do a monthly book. So I say all that to say, I like the fact of keeping all the pieces, and at the same time, which Stan looked at the new X-Men, and he said, "I don't get these characters. The names don't match the characters." He looked around and he said, "Banshee, is this the black woman with the white hair? Because Banshee's a female, right?" He said, "Which one is Nightcrawler? Is this guy like Wolverine? Like these, most of the guys I can't point out. It doesn't work with the Stan Lee rule where you say, okay, the Thing is the monster, the visible person turns invisible is the Visible Girl, the Torch guy," and he said, "Well, in the process of elimination, Mr. Fantastic is Mr. Fantastic, right?" So you can figure out who it is. That new X-Men, which was a interesting point, but at the same time, it was going to a next stage where the book was selling. It was starting to work. So even though Stan was right about his thing, and that doesn't mean, well, oh look, he didn't know what he had, that sort of thing. So let's keep the community together in doing this, and not to kind of say, hey, Roy came out, because it's kind of turned it into conspiracy that the last person who knew passed, and then someone stamped it and no one said anything. He said, well, you're paying attention like the rest of us do. I sit around there at the end of those movies waiting for the thanks. Who did I see my guys? Did I see that? And my friends say no. I look for the Byrne thing, and I'm like, that's not the case. I'm always there for the creator. I'm sitting there for Larry Lieber. I'm so glad he's always gotten credit since Iron Man. They put his name up there. So,
but hold on a second. Should we also credit Byrne? Should we throw that in the mix?
They give him a thanks, but he wouldn't. Him and Claremont don't take the creator owned stuff. They don't look at themselves.
That's not what we're asking. We're saying, does he deserve to be listed as a co-creator?
I don't. They give him a thanks in there, but there's a part of the serendipity.
Co-creator of what though? Co-creator of
Wolverine.
What character?
He wouldn't take it. They wouldn't take it. They said they were more extrapolated and they added to it. So that's why I would go with what they say. Yes.
They're not. No, they're not. They're not creators of the character. They're not creators of the character. I mean, that's like Mark Weisinger saying, "Hey, I look at all the stuff I did for Superman. I should be a co-creator." You're not. The character is who created it. Now, whatever happens to the character afterwards, I mean, that's Rob Liefeld with Deadpool. Deadpool that was very popular is not necessarily the character that Rob Liefeld brought out with those original issues. Okay, but Rob Liefeld is the creator of the character, and once you start going down that road, everybody's trying to get a piece. Everybody's trying to get a piece, and there's only so much to go. There's only so much to go around. Okay, and the biggest is going to go to the people who actually created it. It can't be, well, this character wasn't popular until I did this, or hey, I drew a face on the Venom symbiote, and so now I should get full credit, because that's what the fans really like. No, with the understanding that a lot of characters get created, very few of them hit out of the gate. And then very few of them hit it all, even with time. At the end of the day, you got to credit someone like Stan Lee who says, "I don't see it, but hey, let's let's see where this goes at the end of the day," as opposed to just torpedoing the thing. And then you could say, "Oh, he didn't know what he had," if somebody else picked up the character. But you can't say that because the characters had a run and they had the room to breathe, grow, flourish, and then of course they were able to find their audience once going monthly. But once you go down that other road, that is, that's the slippery slope. To use that phrase of when it comes to ownership and credit, because then, especially when you're dealing with characters that are in serial and they're part of this long running collaborative effort where you have different writers, different artists over the course of decades. over the course of decades, and then what? Everybody gets credit? No, it can't. It just doesn't work. There's nothing going to be left of the character at the end of the day.
Well, and when you talked about like Deadpool, right? And I mean, I guess it's to to go in and the hard part is Rob Liefeld will not. We throw out everybody else that added more stuff to it. We have to keep Fabian Nicieza there, right? Even though he was only the scripter, like I think you can't just sit around and say you can put him 75 and you can put Nicieza 25%, or you want to go 80-20. That 20% or whatever it may be of the creation, even though Marvel, I think Disney probably does even split on it, which bothers Rob Liefeld to no end. I think it's an important part to the character and the characterization, at least at Marvel, because what was there wasn't even clear in the storytelling, but the character was there. The character and how he was writing the voice was there, and that voice was carried on into the later things. When I thought once I saw who's that Greg Capullo draw Deadpool, I said, okay, now I can see it. I can see that this character. Then when they did the miniseries with I can't Joe Mad, like that was like, oh, this is really the concept that we want to see, this mercenary that kind of is joking around, where I was just like, some of the storytelling wasn't that strong in the original, but I mean, to Rob's credit, the book was so, went crazy enough where they asked for Deadpool back for X-Force 2. So he came back in there and that sort of thing. But I don't want to take away from Fabian Nicieza, the guy who put most of the heavy work in there, like all past the point where it's like Deadpool's in like 2 issues and he was there at the start. So it's like, it's not Stan and Jack, but that portion is not a, you can get anyone to do it, but you didn't get the person who was the janitor to do it. You got someone who gave the character and put a lot of groundwork in the character. So
Yeah, and that what you're saying is very important, because if when you're alluding to what, or rather, when you're saying that Liefeld feels that he should get a stronger percentage, if that is how he feels, that's the problem when it comes to hey, credit. Okay, because the whole idea is like, well, you did this part and I did this part, and that's where it should be. And then you want to involve other people into it, like, well, what, I did this, and I did that, and that's where it can really get unwieldy and out of hand at the end of the day when it comes down to it. So if you mention Liefeld, you don't mention the Nicieza, it's like, oh, okay, we need to mention both of them. But wait a second, did somebody else have any hand in it? And the character didn't really take off until Joe Kelly was. It can become a really big mess. It can become a really big mess. And then the problem with it, again, for me, is not so much credit, it's money. Because the character hits, now everybody's got their hand out to make certain that they get their pay. To be honest, like Deadpool for me is easy, because Liefeld was on record saying he was creating all these characters, thinking if one of them did hit, he would get paid. Once he realized that was Marvel's, that was part of working at Marvel in terms of how he was going to be credited, and to his, to his benefit, and smart on his part, he created those characters where a lot of other people didn't. I mean, that's what is it? That's Deadpool. That's Domino. Cable. That was him, and he was like, no, if these characters hit, I'm going to get paid. So he had the foresight to do that. But this also reminds me of the same vein of like when Ed Brubaker was, coming out and sounding a little salty that he wasn't making any money based on the Winter Soldier. Not remember, and I think it must have been lost on him that the Winter Soldier was Bucky Barnes, and he didn't create that character.
mm-hmm.
He did some retrofitting of the character, but that character is still Bucky Barnes. Had he created his own character called the Winter Soldier, no problem, but he didn't do that. And so now that's what the argument that Mars introduces, that some people could make. Well, look at what I did. This is so on and so forth. Yeah, that's great, but you didn't create that character. Okay, you're re-outfitting that character, or you're putting some new flourish on that character, but you didn't create that character, and that's the big difference. You've got to create the character.
But if the character is a major, if those flourishes, as you call it, are essential now for the character, so that people recognize, shouldn't you also be at least that iteration saying, hey, his influence on this particular character made a huge difference in the story. It propelled how the character should be kept. Let's go back to the runs of in Black Panther, right? The Hoodlin brothers,
right?
what's his name, Christopher
If
Priest.
I
I mean, you
it,
said before that that's a definitive run. I mean, he's imbued the character with certain powers that were not necessarily at the very beginning, certain type of storylines,
well, you
background.
can go back. You can go back before that, okay, and you can look at Panther's Rage, that was done by Don McGregor, and that really is the first. That's the first real introduction we get into Wakanda. He maps out the entire country, okay, the entire country of Wakanda at the end of the day. So even while Christopher Priest is running around Wakanda doing stuff, he's running around in the world that Don McGregor created. So you could go back. You can go back and continue with that at the end of the day. But I guess for lack of a better analogy, if I put white wall tires on a Model T Ford, am I now Henry Ford? Do I get credit for the automobile and for creating it?
I
And but
wouldn't
people
say
like,
that, but I'm saying that. But if you
everybody's
put,
like, oh, look at those
but
tires. Now I really got to
but
own one. I'm like, okay, well,
but
I guess it's me.
but if you put if I think he was originally starting off with electric car engines, and you say, hey Henry, you know what? Let's put the gas powered one in and see how that one works out. Then I
Mhm.
guess probably we should say, hey, yo, he really changed it up, right?
No, see, you can't
You
say
were
that because
influenced.
what you're doing is an observation, and an observation, you would have to think that an observation is it's there. It's like, hey, look at this rainbow. I may not have seen it at first, and you pointed it out, but because it's there, you can't. There's a very
I'm
good
saying
chance
to
I
that,
might have seen. There's a very good chance I might have seen it as well. But an idea is not an observation. An idea may never be shared by two people at the end of the day. So the observation of, oh, if we try this, if we do this, we can actually make something better. Yeah. If you're both into engineering, okay, and are looking for ways to propel the car, yeah, there's a good chance you'll both stumble on it or both come to it at the same time. But an idea, the theory of relativity, hey, somebody would have come across that eventually. That's an observation. It's not the same as an idea.
no, I think you're missing. We're talking about collaborative processes in this right here. So it's not just an idea; it's a collaborative process, and we're saying because of this collaborative process that we've
Mm-hmm.
been going through, that Len Wein I mean not Len Wein, can Roy Thomas now claim also co-ownership of it, and
Whose
that's what
idea?
I,
It's
Whose
not
idea was it?
ownership. It's not ownership.
I
See,
create
Right.
not ownership, but creator being the creator of it, and that's what we're
Whose
talking about.
whose
But
idea was it?
we're not saying.
Whose idea was it?
Well, according to Roy
No,
Thomas,
no, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Because when you say according to, you're making it seem like it's not true. It's Roy Thomas's idea. That's the fact. Okay, those are the facts. It's Roy Thomas's idea. The same thing with that's where Stanley and Steve Ditko get into it. Okay, whose idea is Spider-Man? Whose idea is Wolverine? Whose idea is this character? Whose idea is it? Without that idea, do you have this character? The answer is no, you don't. The past is immutable. We can discuss about, but the bottom line is this is the history. The past is immutable. This is what happens. So the idea is what gets everything started. Now, what you're talking about, I totally agree with. Once it becomes a collaborative thing, no problem. Okay, no problem as to that. And the working of it allows for that collaborative process. And what I also think is a fair split of equal ownership of the character. So somebody can't come over here, well, I get 90%, you get 10 because of X, Y, and Z reason, and we're both work for hire. That's ridiculous. But that's something different in terms of the collaboration. But without the idea, there's nothing to collaborate about. And so you have to go back to that. And with a lot of these, you go back to the initial idea. Most people, that is where the character comes from. It's just indisputable.
well, it's. I mean, this is not. This is just to add on to it. Yeah, we just get into this weeds of this thing where we kind of get, everything gets lost into who did who, and we had a portion where we had the X-Men that had all the stuff, and the people who kind of said to Chris Claremont that the X-Men could be viable is Neil Adams and Roy Thomas on the X-Men, and they got, Neil decided he did that all on his own, and Roy only did dialogue, whereas At the same time, everything Neil did was bits that were initially from the Stan Lee and Kirby run. Most of it was Savage Land, Magneto, Sentinels, all that stuff was created beforehand, except for the last story, which they go into space. Well, they don't go to space. The villains are coming from space, and Professor Xavier has to stop them. And that was a wholly, as Roy said, that was a wholly Neil idea, and that's the one where he kind of said, well, "I don't have any part of this story. I think I'm going to bow out and let Denny O'Neil write it." And Neil Adams was scripted, and Neil Adams was kind of bothered that he had left it. But we get into these weeds where we start saying this, that, and the other, and that's the point I wanted to say is like, hey, if Rob Liefeld comes with a sketchbook, and then they say, all right, we're going to do a ton of these characters. We're going to use the Mutant Liberation Fund, we're going to use Cable, we're going to use Strife, and then the writers sitting around there talking with Rob. They're developing what they're going to do, and then Rob at the same time is and writing script out, sending the plots out to Rob. Rob is drawing it. Rob is asking for, hey, some cool soda, X-Men near the soda machine, talking and hanging out type of stuff, and he's Xing out those pages to draw action stuff. And then you secretly going to the editor-in-chief and saying, hey, I want to take over this book. And then you've been collaborating with the person, and then now you kind of kick the writer out and you're doing it. It's just like, were you not collaborating beforehand, even if you had the designs, and Marvel wasn't going to let you script the book on your own? But I mean, like Bob Harris is doing what he's supposed to. He realized who the horse was, the one that's going to get him at the end of the race, that's going to win the race, which were the artists, and he sided with them, and he kept the writers that would just sit and say nothing. They would just take whatever the pages were. But for that thing of coming in and doing what you can, Wade Disney looks at it as like, hey, you put the script on there, we're giving you a portion of it. You did the first time, that's what we're doing. But it gets kind of for the creators, we got to a point where the Marvel creators were talking about the collaborative process, and I think the Image guys were going to, hey, the artists are the guys, where the old school ones were like, hey, we weren't even doing it for money. Like, we weren't getting, the X-Men stuff, they weren't even getting royalties in the 70s. They didn't get royalties till till DC got royalties. Who knows when they would have got royalties if DC hadn't already given to them first. So this whole portion of the creator part of it and getting any sort of credit afterwards would have never happened. It's just out of the competitive nature of Marvel and DC. Like, that portion you might not have gotten. None of them might have had any sort of credit. Everyone have been crying at the end of that's the thing. The people in the 70s, they see X-Men stuff, they see the movies, they see all that stuff, and there's nothing they can say. They don't say anything. They understand that they love real comics.
All right. So what about introducing other element? The element of, let's say, the Wolverine limited series, right, where Frank Miller.
He's on the phone.
Someone's background is on.
Please mute. Cal?
Is that you?
Cal?
Mars?
Is that who?
Background.
There's like a background noise.
I'm good. I don't have any background.
Neither do I. So when you have Frank Miller and Claremont introducing the whole Japanese origins portion of his character, I mean, now, does he now get to be able to say, hey,
we don't do that. We do not do Paul Jenkins who created James Howlett. We don't take all the credit from the people who created it and give it to Paul Jenkins and Andy Kubert.
And we already established this. We already established this. Stop coming over here and poking the bear. Okay? No, you don't get it.
Who's poking the bear? Am I a bear poker?
Yes, you are. Stop poking the bear. Okay? Stop poking the bear. Stop poking the Wolverine. Okay, this character was already established for years before we get these stories. And Wolverine's origin was something that was so nebulous that what was it, like 30 years into the character before they finally had a set origin for him?
Yeah, one that didn't even work with. He wasn't even from Canada anymore.
Yep.
All right, so look,
They
Let's
took
wrap it
him
up.
away. It's almost as if like we needed the Paul Jenkins. Does he deserve credit now because it wasn't from Canada? You know, it's like he's an age-old character.
Hey, we want to support our Canadian friends, Petey. Let's not go there, okay?
Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right. So hey, we're sticking to it. We're saying we give Roy Thomas credit, right?
I don't have any issue with it. It was already it already came up in Logan. They gave him a special thanks, right? Maybe there's someone else where they put it and they put the name, but I don't know if there's a large cash out for Roy Thomas. I don't know if they think that it is. I believe the big money has already gone out from Disney, so I don't think you're getting residual stuff for this thing. So I'm for getting some sort of credit. Yes, whatever putting them in there, it was been established since 2017, and they're making it sound like it wasn't, or maybe they forgot to put it on the X-Men movie after that. But there was some credit put in there. No, that was his last movie, right? That was Hugh Jackman's last movie was Logan. And he wasn't in the other X-Men movie, so we don't have nothing else to discuss about it. There's only reason why we don't have anything after that is because Logan was his last thing. So I say give him credit. He was a big part of it, and a little more so than the X-Men, but he had a big part in the direction of the X-Men. So at the same time, there's not that much money in it. Give the person a nod and say this. We wouldn't have this without him, and let's not look at him as a usurper coming in later and saying, hey, I did kind of editorially say something, and that's how they're making it sound. No disrespect to the creators, because they're the writers that are coming in there, because they're more mainstay in comics than I have been. So we just kind of talking about it, but hey, Roy Thomas has a big part in it. Let's give it to him.
Okay. So we're wrapping it up then.
I'm just going to go one step further and say it's not about giving Roy Thomas credit. They already gave him credit. Okay, so this is really, coming in. It's kind of egregious. You're coming in 7 years later saying this is totally unfair. Where were you 7 years ago? You already got credit. Done.
Okay. All right, there it is, ladies and gents. Spinner rack.
And ladies and gents, we still didn't get an official opinion from Mars. Maybe
I say give it to him. I'm all for it, bro.
For it, okay. I'm just making sure. All right.
There goes it. There's no stirring the pot there.
Cool.
Poking
I'm
the bear.
wrong. I stand corrected.
All right. Spinner rack.
Out.